The Texas sun hung low and merciless in the October sky of 1874, casting long shadows across the sparse mesquite trees and red earth that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The wind, cold and sharp as a blade, whistled through the rocky canyons, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust. This was unforgiving land, where the line between life and death was as thin as a rattlesnake's fang. Emma ran. Her bare feet, bloodied and swollen, barely touched the ground as she stumbled through the thorny underbrush. The tattered remains of what had once been a blue calico dress hung from her frame like rags, stained with dirt, sweat, and darker things she didn't want to remember. Her blonde hair, once neatly pinned, now fell in matted tangles around her face, obscuring eyes that had seen too much in the past weeks. Behind her, somewhere in the vast emptiness, were the men who had taken everything from her. She had been foolish to trust the well-dressed gentleman in Fort Worth who promised work at a respectable boarding house in El Paso. Instead, she'd found herself in a wagon heading south toward the Mexican border, along with 3 other women who'd fallen for the same lies. The others hadn't survived the journey. Emma had escaped during a torrential downpour 3 nights ago, when the guards had grown careless with whiskey and the darkness had been complete. She'd slipped her bonds, worn loose by weeks of struggling, and disappeared into the storm. Since then, she'd been running, hiding, drinking from muddy puddles, and eating nothing but the few mesquite beans she could find. Now, her strength was failing. The gash on her left shoulder, courtesy of a guard's knife when she'd fought back, had stopped bleeding but burned with the heat of infection. Her vision swam, and each breath felt like fire in her lungs. She knew she couldn't go much further. The sound of water, real, running water, reached her ears like a promise of salvation. She changed direction, stumbling down a rocky slope toward the sound. There, cutting through a grove of cottonwoods, ran a clear stream. Emma fell to her knees at its edge, cupping the cool water to her cracked lips, drinking deeply despite the pain it caused her raw throat. She tried to stand, to continue moving, but her legs buckled. The world tilted sideways, and she collapsed onto the sandy bank, her cheek pressed against the cool earth. This was where she would die, she thought dimly. At least it was beside water, under trees. At least she would die free. Through her fading consciousness, she heard hoofbeats. Terror gave her a final surge of strength, and she tried to crawl toward the undergrowth, but her body wouldn't obey. The hoofbeats stopped. Footsteps approached, soft, almost silent, not the heavy boots of white men. A shadow fell across her. She forced her eyes open and found herself looking up at a Comanche warrior. He sat astride a painted pony, his dark eyes studying her with an expression she couldn't read. His hair, black as a raven's wing, fell past his shoulders, adorned with a single eagle feather. He wore buckskin leggings and a cloth shirt, with a rifle across his saddle and a knife at his belt. Beside him, on a smaller pony, sat a boy of perhaps 8 years, watching her with the same dark, cautious eyes. The warrior said something in his language, a question, perhaps. Emma tried to speak, to beg, but only a croak emerged from her throat. The man's expression didn't change. He began to turn his horse away. "No!" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Please, don't leave me." The boy suddenly slipped from his pony and approached her, reaching into a leather pouch at his side. His father made a sharp sound of warning, but the child ignored it, kneeling beside Emma and pressing something into her hand. Dried meat. The smell of it made her stomach clench with hunger. She tried to eat, but her hands shook too badly. The boy, with a gentleness that seemed beyond his years, helped her, breaking off small pieces and placing them in her mouth. His father watched from his horse, his face a mask of stone. Emma managed a few bites before the effort became too much. She looked up at the warrior, trying to convey with her eyes what her voice couldn't manage. She had no idea what these men might do with her. She'd heard terrible stories about the Comanche, but anything was better than being found by the traders. At least with death, there would be an end to the running. The warrior spoke again, this time to his son. The boy stood and backed away. For a long moment, the man simply sat there, looking down at her. Emma could see him weighing his options, could see the conflict in his eyes. A white woman meant trouble. The soldiers would come looking. His people had enough enemies without adding more. Then the boy spoke. A single word that Emma didn't understand, but the pleading in his voice was universal. The warrior's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. He dismounted in one fluid motion and approached her carefully, as one might approach a wounded animal. When he bent to examine her, Emma flinched, but his hands were surprisingly gentle as he checked her injuries. He said something under his breath. It sounded like a curse when he saw the infected gash on her shoulder. Then, without warning, he scooped her up as easily as if she weighed nothing. Emma wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some dignity, but she had no strength left. She let her head fall against his chest, surprised by the warmth she found there. He smelled of smoke, leather, and sage, earthy, alive, so different from the stale whiskey and sweat of her captors. He lifted her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, one arm holding her securely against him. The boy remounted his own pony, looking pleased with the turn of events. The warrior spoke a command, and they began moving, not fast, but steadily, following a path only he could see. They rode for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one, winding through canyons and along ridges, always climbing. Emma drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of the strong arm around her waist and the steady rhythm of the horse's gait. Once, when she stirred, she felt the warrior's hand move to check if she still breathed. Finally, they stopped. Emma opened her eyes to find they had entered a narrow canyon, its walls rising high on either side. Hidden among the rocks was a simple shelter, a buffalo hide stretched over a wooden frame, with a fire pit nearby. It was a meager camp, but it was well concealed and defensible. The warrior dismounted first, then lifted Emma down. Her legs wouldn't hold her, and he had to carry her to the shelter. Inside, he laid her on a bed of furs and blankets. The boy appeared with water in a hollowed gourd, which the warrior held to her lips. As Emma drank, she studied her rescuer's face. He was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with strong features marked by lines of grief that seemed too deep for his years. There was something in his eyes, a sadness, a loneliness, that spoke of great loss. The boy built up the fire while his father tended to Emma's wounds. The warrior's hands were skilled, cleaning the gash with water mixed with something that stung but smelled of pine. He worked in silence, his face betraying no emotion even when Emma gasped in pain. When he finished, he sat back on his heels and looked at her. Then, for the first time, he spoke in English, his words heavily accented but clear. "You run from white men." It wasn't a question. Emma nodded, not trusting her voice. "They follow?" She shook her head, then reconsidered. "Maybe, I don't know." He grunted, then stood. "Rest. Tomorrow, you go." But Emma could see in his eyes that he knew, as she did, that she had nowhere to go. She was a white woman who'd been in the hands of traders, who'd escaped to the wilderness. No decent town would have her now. Her reputation, her future, everything was gone. "Thank you," she whispered as he turned to leave the shelter. He paused at the entrance, silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Thank the boy," he said. "I would have left you." Then he was gone, leaving Emma alone with her exhaustion and her pain. Outside, she could hear him speaking quietly to his son in their language. The boy's voice rose in what sounded like excitement, but the father's responses were measured, cautious. As darkness fell and the fire cast dancing shadows on the shelter walls, Emma pulled the blanket tight around herself. She was alive, against all odds. She had survived. The traders hadn't found her. She was safe, at least for tonight, in the care of a Comanche warrior who had every reason to leave her to die but hadn't. She closed her eyes, and, for the first time in weeks, fell into a sleep, untroubled by nightmares of reaching hands and leering faces. Instead, she dreamed of dark eyes filled with hidden sorrow, of gentle hands that knew how to heal as well as how to kill, and of a small boy whose compassion had saved her life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow, she would have to decide what to do with this second chance at life. But tonight, she was warm, she was safe, and she was free. For now, that was enough. The wind outside the shelter had died down, and the stars emerged one by one in the vast Texas sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and its pack answered. The night sounds of the frontier surrounded the small camp, but within the circle of firelight, there was peace. The warrior sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle with practiced movements. The boy lay curled in his blankets, already asleep, and in the shelter, a broken woman began the long journey of becoming whole again, though she didn't know it yet. This was how their story began, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with simple human kindness in a harsh land that rarely showed mercy to anyone, regardless of the color of their skin. It was a beginning born of necessity and compassion, of a child's pure heart and a father's reluctant humanity. And in the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Texas, where cultures clashed and blood was too often spilled over differences that seemed insurmountable, it was perhaps the only beginning possible for a love that would defy every convention of their divided world. Emma woke to the sound of voices speaking in a language she didn't understand. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then memory returned. The Comanche warrior, his son, the shelter. She lay still, listening. The man's voice was deep and measured, the boy's higher and more animated. They seemed to be discussing something, perhaps arguing, though she couldn't be sure. Slowly, she opened her eyes. Daylight filtered through the hide walls of the shelter, revealing her surroundings more clearly than the night before. The space was sparse but clean, with the neatly folded blankets, a few cooking implements, and weapons hung carefully on wooden frames. Everything spoke of a life pared down to essentials, of someone who traveled light and expected to move at a moment's notice. She tried to sit up and gasped as pain shot through her shoulder. The sound must have carried outside, for the voices stopped. A moment later, the warrior ducked through the entrance, carrying a bowl of something that steamed in the cool morning air. He studied her for a moment, then knelt beside her, setting the bowl within reach. "Drink," he said in his accented English. It was a broth of some kind, rich and savory. Emma's stomach clenched with hunger, and she reached for it eagerly, only to find her hand still shaking too badly to hold it steady. Without a word, the warrior took it from her and held it to her lips, allowing her to sip slowly. "Thank you," she whispered between sips. He didn't respond, but she thought she saw something flicker in his dark eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she would thank him for such a simple kindness. When the bowl was empty, he sat back and regarded her with that same unreadable expression. "You have a name?" Emma hesitated. Her real name belonged to the girl she'd been before, the schoolteacher's daughter from Ohio who'd come west full of hope. That a girl was gone. "Clara," she said finally, choosing her middle name. "My name is Clara." He nodded once. "I am called Kohana." At her blank look, he added, "Swift in your tongue, Swift, and your son, Chayton." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Falcon." The boy appeared in the entrance as if summoned by his name, carrying an armload of firewood. He grinned when he saw Clara awake and said something to his father in rapid Comanche. Kohana responded sharply, and the boy's smile faded. He set down the wood and retreated outside. "What did he say?" Clara asked. Kohana was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "He asks if you are his new mother." The words hit her like a physical blow. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "His mother is dead." The words were flat, emotionless, but Clara could see the pain they covered. "2 winters passed. White soldiers came to our camp. She burned." Clara's hand moved involuntarily to her own scarred wrists, remembering fire of a different kind. "I'm sorry," she said again. knowing how inadequate the words were. Kohana stood abruptly. "You are not well enough to travel. Rest today, tomorrow, perhaps." He moved toward the entrance, then paused. "You will not run." "Where would I go?" The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. He studied her for a long moment, then produced a length of rope from his belt. "Your people would say I cannot trust a white woman alone, that you will bring soldiers." Clara's heart sank, but she understood. She held out her wrists. "Do what you must." He looked at her outstretched hands, then at her face. Something he saw there must have decided him, for he put the rope away. "You are too weak to run far, and Chayton would be sad if I tied the woman who his kindness saved." After he left, Clara lay back on the furs, trying to process everything. She was in a Comanche camp, dependent on the mercy of a man who had every reason to hate her kind. His wife had been killed by soldiers, men who looked like the father and brothers Clara had left behind in Ohio. Yet he had saved her, was caring for her. The day passed slowly. Kohana came and went, bringing water, checking her wounds, saying little. The boy, Chayton, was less reserved. He would peek around the entrance, curiosity obvious in his young face, until his father ordered him away. Once, when Kohana was gone, the boy crept in and sat cross-legged beside her, chattering in Comanche. Clara didn't understand a word, but his animated gestures and expressive face told their own story. He was showing her things: a carved wooden horse, a colorful stone, a feather, treasures of a lonely child. When Kohana returned and found them thus, Clara tensed, expecting anger. Instead, he spoke quietly to his son, who nodded and scampered out. "He has not talked so much since his mother died," Kohana said, and Clara heard wonder in his voice. That evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls in shades of red and gold, Clara felt strong enough to sit up properly. Kohana had made a stew of rabbit and wild roots, and this time she managed to feed herself, though slowly. They ate in silence, the three of them around the small fire, like a strange echo of a family. "Why do you live apart?" Clara asked finally, curiosity overcoming caution. "Where is your tribe?" Kohana's jaw tightened. "I have no tribe, not anymore. Because of your wife, because of what I did after." He stared into the fire. "I took revenge, killed 3 soldiers, killed them slowly. The tribal council said I brought danger to our people. They were right, so I left." Clara absorbed this. He was in exile, like her, cast out for violence, while she had been cast out by violence. "And you've been alone since then?" "Chayton and I, we trade with Mexican settlements sometimes. Avoid whites and Indians both." His lips twisted. "Until yesterday." "I won't bring trouble to you," Clara said. "As soon as I can walk, I'll go." "Where?" The question was sharp. "To your people? You think they will welcome a woman who was taken by traitors? Who lived?" He shook his head. "I know white women. Better to die than be dishonored." Clara felt heat rise in her face, shame and anger warring within her. "Then I'll go to Mexico. Or somewhere. It doesn't matter." "You speak Spanish?" She shook her head. "You have money, family?" Again. No, her family thought she was teaching school in Fort Worth. By now, they probably thought she was dead. It was better that way. "Then you will die," Kohana said matter-of-factly. "If animals don't kill you, men will. White men, Mexican, Indian, makes no difference. A woman alone is prey." Clara knew he was right, but the knowledge sat like lead in her stomach. "Then what would you have me do?" He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different, uncertain. "Winter comes soon. We will move to the sheltered valley where game is better. You could stay until spring, until you are strong. You would do that for a white woman?" His eyes met hers across the fire. "For a woman with no place to go. Color matters less than survival out here." That night, Clara lay awake despite her exhaustion. Through the shelter's entrance, she could see Kohana sitting by the dying fire, keeping watch. His profile was sharp against the starlight, noble and sad in equal measure. She wondered what he'd been like before grief had carved those lines into his face. Had he laughed often? Had he been gentle with his wife? Sometime near dawn, she woke from a nightmare, thrashing and gasping. She was back in the trader's camp, hands grabbing at her, whiskey-soaked breath in her face. A scream built in her throat. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, holding her still. "You are safe!" Kohana's voice cut through the panic. "Look at me! You are safe!" She focused on his face, barely visible in the darkness. His hands were warm through the thin fabric of her torn dress. Gradually, her breathing slowed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you. I was not sleeping." He started to pull away, but she caught his wrist. "Please, just stay for a moment. I don't want to be alone." She felt him tense, probably scandalized by her forwardness. But after a moment, he settled beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "My wife had dreams too," he said quietly. "After the soldiers came the first time, before she would wake crying. What did you do?" Held her, sang the old songs until she slept again. His voice was thick with memory. "I failed to protect her in the end." Without thinking, Clara reached out and touched his hand. He jerked as if burned, but didn't pull away. "You can't protect everyone from everything," she said. "Sometimes terrible things just happen." They sat in silence until the sky began to lighten. Then Kohana rose and left without a word. Clara thought she had offended him, but when he returned with breakfast, his manner was gentler than before. Days passed. Clara's strength returned slowly. She began helping with small tasks, tending the fire, mending torn clothing with the needle and sinew Kohana provided. Chayton shadowed her everywhere, teaching her Comanche words with a patient persistence only a child could muster. "Pa," he would say, pointing to water. "Puku," for horse. Kohana watched these interactions with an expression Clara couldn't decipher. Sometimes she caught him looking at her when he thought she wasn't aware, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. One afternoon, while Kohana was hunting, Clara ventured outside the shelter for the first time. The canyon was beautiful in a stark way, with red rock walls rising toward an impossibly blue sky. Chayton showed her where a small spring bubbled from the rocks, feeding the grass and few hardy trees. "Pia," he said, pointing to his mother. Then he pointed to Clara. "Pia? No," Clara said gently. "I'm not your mother, little falcon." But he had already darted away, chasing a lizard among the rocks. Clara watched him go, her heart aching. He was so young to have lost so much. Like her, she supposed, though she had been grown when her world shattered. When Kohana returned at dusk with a deer slung over his horse, he found them by the spring, Clara sitting on a flat rock while Chayton showed her how to weave grass into simple shapes. The warrior stopped at the sight, and Clara saw something raw and vulnerable flash across his face before his usual mask fell back into place. That night, after Chayton had fallen asleep, Kohana spoke. "He has not played like that since before. He's a good boy. You've raised him well. His mother raised him. I have only tried not to let him forget her ways." He paused, then added quietly, "But he is forgetting. Her voice, her songs. He is too young to hold such memories." Clara understood. She was already forgetting things about her old life. The exact shade of her mother's eyes. The sound of her sister's laugh. Trauma had a way of erasing what came before. "Perhaps," she said carefully. "That's not entirely bad. The pain fades with the memories. And if pain is all you have left of someone?" She had no answer for that. They sat in companionable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Finally, Clara asked the question that had been haunting her. "Your wife, what was her name?" "Ayana, Eternal Bloom." His voice was soft. "She was beautiful, strong. She could ride better than most warriors, shoot straighter, but she was gentle too. She had healing hands." "Like yours," Clara thought, but didn't say. "How did you meet?" A smile ghosted across his lips. "She shot me." Clara's eyes widened, and he actually chuckled, the first time she'd heard him make such a sound. I was young, proud, tried to steal her father's best horse to prove myself. She was guarding the herd, put an arrow through my shoulder. Then she felt bad and healed me. By the time I could ride again, I knew I would marry no other. She sounds wonderful. She was. The smile faded. I should have made her flee when the soldiers came close, but she said a warrior's wife does not run. She died as she lived, brave and stubborn. They talked until late, sharing stories. Clara found herself telling him things she hadn't meant to, about her father's death when she was 15, how she'd worked to help her mother support the younger children, how she'd finally saved enough to come west and make a fresh start, how that dream had turned to nightmare. You are strong too, Kohana said when she finished. To survive what you did, to escape, not many would have the will. I'm not strong, Clara said. I'm broken. What they did. She couldn't finish. You survived. He repeated. That takes its own kind of strength. Do not dishonor it with shame that belongs to those who hurt you. She looked at him then, really looked at him. In the firelight, his face was all plains and shadows, harsh and beautiful at once. There was understanding in his eyes, the recognition of one survivor looking at another. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded and rose. Sleep now. Tomorrow we begin preparing for the journey to winter camp. You will need strength. As he started to leave, Clara called out, Kohana? He paused. I want to stay, if you'll have me, through winter. He was silent for so long she thought he would refuse. Then, Chayton would like that. And you? He turned to look at her, and for a moment, his guard dropped entirely. She saw loneliness there, and need, and fear, and something else, something that made her pulse quicken. Sleep, he said again, and disappeared into the darkness. Clara lay back on the furs, but sleep was a long time coming. She thought about the way he'd looked at her, about the warmth of his hands on her shoulders when she'd woken from nightmare. She thought about Chayton's eager face and bright laughter. She had set out from Ohio to build a new life, only to have it torn away. But perhaps, in this unlikely place with these unlikely people, she might find something she hadn't even known she was looking for. Perhaps some broken things could be mended after all. Outside, she could hear Kohana moving about, checking the horses, banking the fire, standing guard, as he did every night, protecting them. She pulled the blanket tighter and closed her eyes, feeling safer than she had in months. Tomorrow would bring challenges, learning to live in a different world, with different ways, navigating whatever was growing between her and this complicated, wounded man, helping a motherless boy who wanted so desperately to not be motherless anymore. But tonight, she was warm and fed and safe. Tonight, that was miracle enough. The days grew shorter as autumn deepened in the Texas hill country. Clara's hands, once soft from teaching children their letters, became calloused from the work of survival. Each morning, she helped Chayton gather firewood while Kohana checked his trap lines. She learned to scrape hides, to identify edible plants, to read the sky for signs of weather change. Kohana taught her with patient efficiency, showing rather than telling. Here, he would say, demonstrating how to set a snare. The rabbit runs this path. See the tracks? Place it so. His hands would guide hers, adjusting the position of her fingers on the twisted sinew. Clara tried not to notice how her pulse quickened at his touch. One crisp morning, as she struggled to start a fire with flint and steel, Kohana knelt beside her. You strike too hard, like this. He wrapped his hand around hers, guiding the motion. Quick, sharp. Let the steel do the work. Sparks flew, catching the tinder. Clara smiled in triumph, then noticed how close he was. Close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. He seemed to realize it too, pulling back abruptly. You learn, he said, his voice rougher than usual, and strode away. Chayton was her constant shadow, chattering in a mixture of Comanche and the English words she taught him. He showed her his secret places, a hollow tree where he kept his treasures, a flat rock perfect for watching clouds, a bend in the stream where small fish gathered. "Pia Clara," he would say, tugging her hand. "Come see." She'd given up correcting him about the mother title. Each time she tried, his face would fall, and she couldn't bear to dim his brightness. Kohana said nothing about it, though she sometimes caught him watching them with an expression of profound sadness. One afternoon, while Kohana was away hunting, Clara sat mending a tear in Chayton's shirt. The boy played nearby with his carved horse, making galloping sounds. Suddenly, he froze, head tilted, listening. "What is it?" Clara asked, but he pressed a finger to his lips. Then she heard it too. Horses approaching, several of them. Her blood turned to ice. Chayton grabbed her hand and pulled her toward a cluster of boulders behind the shelter. They crouched there, hearts pounding, as 3 riders came into view. They were white men, rough-looking, with the unmistakable bearing of those who lived outside the law. Clara recognized the type. She'd seen enough of them in the traders' camp. They circled the shelter, talking in low voices. "Apache, maybe," one said. "Or Comanche. Don't see no one around," another replied. "But someone lives here, sure enough. Fresh ashes in that fire pit." The third man dismounted and entered the shelter. Clara held her breath, praying they wouldn't find anything to identify her. Chayton pressed against her side, trembling but silent. The man emerged holding one of her mended dresses, the blue calico, cleaned and patched. "Well, looky here, unless them Indians take into wearing women's clothes." Clara's heart sank. They would know now. A white woman with Indians. They would wait, or search, or... A rifle shot cracked through the air. One of the horses screamed and bucked, its rider fighting for control. Another shot followed, kicking up dust near the second rider's feet. "Move on." Kohana's voice carried from somewhere above them on the canyon wall. "Nothing here for you." The men scrambled for cover, drawing their own weapons. "We don't want no trouble. Indian." The leader called out, "Just looking for someone. A woman. White woman got taken by traders. Might have passed this way. No white woman here. Move on." The man held up Clara's dress. "Then explain this." Another shot, and the dress jerked from his hand, a bullet hole through the fabric. "Belonged to my wife. Dead now." "You want to join her?" Clara bit her knuckle to keep from gasping. Kohana was claiming her as his wife, as dead, protecting her even now. The men exchanged glances. They were outgunned, facing an enemy on high ground who knew the terrain. "All right," the leader said finally. "We're going. But if we find out you're lying, Indian, you won't." They mounted and rode out, faster than they'd come in. Clara stayed frozen until Kohana appeared, rifle in hand, face grim. "Papa!" Chayton broke free and ran to him, chattering rapidly in Comanche. Kohana listened, then looked at Clara. "You did well, kept him quiet, stayed hidden. They were looking for me," Clara said unnecessarily. "Yes." He studied her face. "The traders?" She shook her head. "Bounty hunters. Maybe. The traders might have put out word, offered a reward." She laughed bitterly. "I'm valuable property, after all." Kohana's jaw tightened. He said something sharp in Comanche that sounded like a curse. "We leave tomorrow. This place is no longer safe." That night, they packed what little they had. Clara noticed Kohana adding extra ammunition to his supplies, his movements tense and watchful. After Chayton fell asleep, she approached him. "I'm sorry, I've brought danger to you both. I should go." "Where?" He turned on her, eyes flashing. "To them? To men who would—" He broke off, visibly controlling himself. "You stay. We protect our own. I'm not yours to protect." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "No, you cook our food, mend our clothes, teach my son. You think this means nothing? I'm grateful, but grateful." He nearly spat the word. "You think I want gratitude? Then what do you want?" For a moment, something raw and hungry flashed in his eyes. He raised his hand as if to touch her face, then let it fall. "Go to sleep. We ride at dawn." They traveled for 3 days, following paths Clara could barely see, camping without fires, speaking in whispers. Kohana pushed them hard, but never beyond what Clara could manage. When she stumbled from exhaustion, he would call a halt, saying Chaitin needed rest. On the 4th day, they descended into a hidden valley that took Clara's breath away, protected on all sides by towering cliffs. It was an oasis of green in the harsh landscape. A stream wound through cottonwoods and willows. Deer tracks marked the soft earth near the water. "Winter camp," Kohana said simply, but Clara could see the tension ease from his shoulders. They spent the next days building a more permanent shelter, using bent saplings and buffalo hides to create a dwelling that would withstand winter storms. Clara threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction from her confused feelings. She couldn't stop thinking about that moment by the campfire, the look in Kohana's eyes. She found herself watching him when he wasn't aware, the graceful way he moved, the gentle patience he showed with Chaitin, the rare smiles that transformed his stern features. One evening, as she prepared their meal, she realized she was humming, something she hadn't done since leaving Ohio. Kohana looked up from the arrow he was fletching. "My mother's lullaby," Clara explained, embarrassed. "I didn't realize." "Sing it." The request surprised her. It's nothing special. Chaitin would like it, but it wasn't Chaitin he was looking at." Clara's cheeks warmed, but she sang, her voice soft and uncertain at first, then growing stronger. It was a simple melody about a mockingbird and a golden ring, but in this wild place, it seemed to carry all the longing for home and safety and love that lived in her heart. When she finished, Chaitin was smiling sleepily. "Pretty," he murmured in English. "Sing more, Pia?" she sang until he slept, aware all the while of Kohana's steady gaze. When she finally fell silent, he spoke quietly. Ayana sang to him every night. He has missed it. "I'm not trying to replace her," Clara said quickly. "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "But perhaps it is not wrong for him to have music again." Their days fell into a rhythm. Kohana hunted and trapped. Clara kept the camp, prepared meals, worked on new winter clothing from the hides he brought. Chaitin helped them both, learning the skills he would need to survive. One day, while gathering plants near the stream, Clara slipped on wet stones and fell. The water was shallow but icy, soaking through her dress. She struggled to stand, gasping at the cold, when strong hands lifted her. "Foolish woman," Kohana muttered, but his touch was gentle as he helped her to shore. "You will freeze." Her teeth were already chattering. He wrapped his own blanket around her and all but carried her back to camp. "Change clothes," he ordered. "Quickly." Clara ducked into the shelter, stripping off the wet dress with numb fingers. She had only one other dress, the patched calico. As she reached for it, she heard Kohana enter behind her. "Here." He held out one of his shirts and a pair of soft doeskin leggings, warmer than thin cloth. She clutched the wet dress to her chest, acutely aware of her state of undress. Kohana's eyes stayed fixed on her face, but she saw the muscle jump in his jaw. "Thank you," she managed. He turned his back. "Tell me when you are covered." Clara dressed quickly in the unfamiliar garments. The shirt fell past her hips. The leggings had to be rolled at the ankles, but they were indeed warm. "I'm decent." He turned, and something flared in his eyes as he took in the sight of her in his clothes. He stepped forward, reaching out to adjust the shirt where it gaped at her shoulder. His fingers brushed her skin, and they both froze. "Kohana!" she whispered. He pulled back as if burned. "You should rest. The cold water. You could take ill." But Clara had spent too many nights wondering, too many days stealing glances. She caught his hand. "Why did you really let me stay?" He could have pulled away. She wasn't strong enough to hold him. Instead, he stood perfectly still, looking down at their joined hands. "You know why. I need to hear it." His free hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing over her cheekbone. "Because when I saw you by the stream, broken but still fighting, I saw myself. Because my son smiled again when you smiled at him. Because—" his voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Because when you are near, I remember I am still alive." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She turned her face into his palm. Pressing her lips to the calloused skin, she felt him shudder. "This is not wise," he said roughly. "You are white, I am Comanche. Your people are not coming for me." She looked up at him. "I have no people anymore, only you and Chayton." Clara, her name on his lips was part warning, part plea. She raised up on her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat. He stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him as he deepened the kiss. He tasted of smoke and something wild, something that made her feel alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should not. You have been hurt. I will not be another man who— You're not." She framed his face with her hands. "You're nothing like them. You're good and gentle and—" He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. When he pulled back, his eyes were troubled. "I cannot give you what a white man could. No church wedding, no fine house, only this." He gestured to the shelter, the wild valley beyond. "This is enough," Clara said, and meant it. More than enough. That night, she lay in her usual place, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Kohana's lips on hers, his arms around her. He was just feet away. She knew, probably as wakeful as she. Finally, she rose and slipped outside. He was sitting by the banked fire, keeping watch as always. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Sit." She settled beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. "Tell me about before," Clara said eventually, "before the sorrow." So he did. He told her about growing up on the open plains, about buffalo hunts that stretched for days, about summer gatherings where the bands came together to trade and feast and race horses. He spoke of vision quests and warrior societies, of his pride when he counted his first coup in battle. "It was a good life," he said. "Hard sometimes, but free. Then the whites came in greater numbers. The buffalo grew scarce. The soldiers built forts. Everything changed." "I'm sorry," Clara said, knowing how inadequate it was. "You did not do these things. My people did." He was quiet for a moment. "And your people hurt you. Perhaps we are both exiles from our own kind." She leaned against his shoulder, and after a moment, his arm came around her. They stayed that way until dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. In the days that followed, something had shifted between them. They didn't kiss again. Kohana seemed determined to keep distance, but there were small touches, lingering looks, a new tenderness in how they spoke to each other. Chayton noticed too. One evening, he looked between them and announced in his improving English, "Papa smiles now, like before." Kohana's cheeks actually darkened, and Clara hid her own smile in her cup of pine needle tea. But happiness in the wilderness was fragile, and Clara knew it. Winter was coming. The men hunting her might return. The fragile bridge she and Kohana were building could collapse under the weight of all that divided them. One night, a snake found its way into the shelter, seeking warmth. Clara woke to find it coiled near her feet. She froze, terror flooding through her. Before she could even cry out, Kohana was there, moving with deadly grace. He caught the snake behind its head and flung it outside in one smooth motion. "Rattler," he said calmly. "Young one. Not much poison, but enough." Clara was shaking. Without thinking, she launched herself into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight against his chest. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. "I won't let anything harm you." "I know," she whispered back, and realized it was true. Somewhere between that first bowl of broth and this moment, she had come to trust him completely. She pulled back just enough to see his face. In the dim light, his eyes were soft, unguarded. "Stay with me tonight," she said. "Just hold me, please." He hesitated, war clear in his expression. Then he nodded. They lay down together. Clara curled into his side, his arm protective around her. She felt his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. "Sleep," he said. "I'm here," and surrounded by his warmth, his strength, his quiet devotion. Clara slept better than she had in years. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight she was home. The storm came without warning on a bitter November evening. Clara watched the sky darken from the shelter entrance as Kohana secured everything that might blow away. Lightning split the horizon, and thunder rolled across the valley like war drums. "Big storm," Chayton said, pressing close to Clara's side. His English had improved remarkably in the weeks since she'd arrived. "Like the night Mama went to the spirits." Clara's heart clenched. She pulled him closer. "This storm will pass. Little Falcon, we're safe here." But she could see the fear in his young eyes, the memory of another storm, another loss. Kohana entered the shelter, water streaming from his hair, and immediately went to his son. Kneeling to meet his eyes, "The storm cannot hurt us here," he said firmly in Comanche, then repeated it in English for Clara's benefit. "We are protected by the valley walls, yes?" Chayton nodded, but when the next thunder crash shook the shelter, he buried his face in Clara's shoulder. She began to sing softly, the same lullaby that had become his favorite. Gradually, his trembling eased. The storm raged through the night. They huddled together around the small fire, Clara telling stories to distract Chayton while Kohana worked on repairing a bridle, his presence steady and reassuring. When the boy finally slept, exhausted by fear and the late hour, Kohana carried him to his bed of furs. "You are good with him," he said quietly, returning to sit beside Clara. "He's easy to love," she replied, then caught herself. I know what you mean." His voice was gentle. "He loves you too, as a son loves a mother." The words hung between them, weighted with possibility and pain. Clara stared into the fire, gathering courage. "And how do you feel?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I feel as a man who thought his heart was ash discovering it still holds embers." Before she could respond, he rose. "I must check the horses, the storm." But she knew it wasn't the storm he was fleeing. It was the growing thing between them, impossible to ignore now in the close quarters of winter preparation. The next morning dawned crystal clear, the storm having washed the world clean. They emerged to find the stream running high and fast with runoff. As they surveyed for damage, Kohana suddenly tensed. "What is it?" Clara asked. He pointed to the soft earth near the stream. "Fresh tracks, horses, at least 4, and boot prints. Riders passed in the night. Use the storm for cover." Clara's blood ran cold. The bounty hunters? Perhaps, or soldiers, or travelers. But his hand moved to his rifle. "We must be more careful." They spent the day reinforcing their shelter and creating hidden caches for supplies. Kohana showed Clara escape routes through the rocks, made her memorize landmarks. His intensity frightened her more than the tracks had. That evening, as she prepared their meal, her hands shook. The false peace of their valley life had been shattered. Kohana noticed. He noticed everything and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I won't let them take you," he said simply. "I'm not afraid for myself." Clara said, "But you and Chayton, if something happened because of me, nothing will happen." His hand moved to cup her cheek. "I have lost one woman to violence. I will not lose another." The possessiveness in his voice, the claim in it, made her breath catch. "Kohana." He kissed her then, not gently as before, but with a desperate hunger that matched her own. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I told myself I would not do this," he said roughly. "You deserve better than a man with blood on his hands, living like a fugitive." "Stop," She gripped his shirt. "Stop deciding what I deserve. I'm here. I choose to be here. With you." That night, after Chayton was asleep, they sat together by the fire. The need to touch, to affirm life in the face of danger, was overwhelming. When Kohana spread his blanket and held out his hand in silent invitation, Clara didn't hesitate. They made love slowly, carefully, aware of the sleeping child nearby. Kohana's hands trembled as they traced her scars, the ones left by ropes, by rough handling, by a life that had tried to break her. He kissed each mark as if he could erase the pain they represented. "Beautiful," he whispered against her skin. "Strong, mine." Clara arched beneath him, tears sliding into her hair, not from pain but from the tenderness, the reverence in his touch. When he entered her, it was with such gentle care that she had to bite her lip to keep from sobbing. "Look at me," he commanded softly, and she opened eyes she hadn't realized she'd closed. His face above her was fierce with concentration, holding back his own need. "You are safe. I am not them. You are safe." "I know," she gasped. "I know. Please." They moved together in the ancient rhythm, two damaged souls finding wholeness in each other. When release came, Clara buried her face in his shoulder to muffle her cries, and felt him shudder silently above her. Afterward, they lay entwined, skin cooling in the night air. Kohana pulled a blanket over them, holding her close. "I did not mean for this," he said quietly. "Neither did I." She traced patterns on his chest. "But I'm not sorry." "Nor am I." He kissed her forehead. "But it complicates things." Things were already complicated. He chuckled, a rare sound that rumbled through his chest. "This is true." They dozed fitfully, starting at every sound outside. Near dawn, Clara woke to find Kohana gone. Panic seized her until she saw him sitting at the shelter entrance, rifle across his knees, keeping watch. She wrapped the blanket around herself and joined him. "You should sleep," he said without looking at her. "So should you." They sat in silence, watching the sky lighten. Finally, Kohana spoke. "If the riders return, you take Chayton and run. The hidden canyon I showed you—" "No." He turned to her, frowning. "You will do as I say. I won't leave you. You will if I tell you to." His voice was hard now. "Chayton needs a mother more than I need." He stopped abruptly. "More than you need what?" Clara asked softly. He looked away. "More than I need anything." But she heard what he didn't say, saw it in the tense line of his shoulders. She leaned against him, and after a moment, his arm came around her. Days passed in heightened vigilance. They saw no more signs of riders, but the threat hung over them. Kohana taught Clara to shoot his rifle, to handle his knife. She was a quick learner, driven by the need to protect their small family. One afternoon, while Kohana was checking his distant trap lines, Clara and Chayton gathered pecans near the stream. The boy chattered happily about the coming winter, the stories his father had promised to tell, the new bow Kohana was making for him. "And you'll be here for all of it," he said matter-of-factly. "Papa said so." "He did." Chayton nodded. "He said you're ours now. That means you can't leave, right?" Before Clara could answer, she heard something that made her blood freeze. Voices, speaking English, coming closer. She grabbed Chayton and pulled him behind a fallen log, pressing her hand over his mouth when he started to protest. 3 men emerged from the trees, the same ones who had come to their camp before. Clara's heart hammered so hard she was sure they would hear it. Sure the tracks led this way. One was saying, "Could be anywhere in these valleys." Another replied, "Like looking for a needle in a haystack." "That woman's worth good money," the leader said. "The Mexican who hired us said she witnessed him kill a man. Can't have her testifying if she turns up alive." Clara bit her knuckle to keep from gasping. So it wasn't just about her value as an escaped captive. The traitor, he must have killed someone after she escaped, and now needed her dead to protect himself. The men passed within feet of their hiding spot. Chayton remained perfectly still, his eyes wide but trusting. Just when Clara thought they were safe, one of the men stopped. Hey, look here. Pecans been gathered recent like. They all turned back, scanning the area. Clara's hand moved to the knife at her belt. Kohana's gift, sharp and well-balanced. She would not let them take her. Not again. And she would die before she let them hurt Chaitin. A shot rang out, echoing off the valley walls. The men scrambled for cover, cursing. That's your only warning. Kohana's voice carried from somewhere above them. Leave now, or feed the coyotes. We know she's here, Indian. The leader called out. Saw her dress, remember? Just give her up and we'll go peaceful like. Another shot, this one taking the hat off the speaker's head. The woman you seek died crossing the desert. Buried her myself. Now go, before I lose patience. The men retreated, but slowly, still scanning the rocks. This ain't over, one called. We'll be back with more men. They disappeared into the trees. Clara stayed frozen until Kohana appeared beside them, materializing from the landscape like smoke. He pulled them both up, checking Chaitin for injury. Then Clara, you did well, he said, but she could see the fear in his eyes, a fear she'd never seen before, not even when facing danger himself. They know I'm alive, Clara said numbly. They'll come back. Yes. He looked between her and his son, and she saw him making calculations. Plans. We leave tonight. They packed only essentials. Kohana buried or hid the rest, marking the caches in ways only he would recognize. As darkness fell, they mounted the horses. Clara on her own now, confident after weeks of practice. Chaitin riding with his father. They climbed out of the valley by a treacherous path Clara hadn't known existed, the horses picking their way carefully in the moonlight. At the top, Kohana paused, looking back at what had been their haven. I'm sorry, Clara said softly. This is my fault. No, his voice was fierce. The fault lies with evil men, not with you. They rode through the night, heading north into lands Kohana knew from his youth. As dawn approached, they sheltered in a grove of ancient oaks, the horses hidden in a dry wash nearby. Chaitin slept between them, exhausted by the night's journey. Clara and Kohana kept watch, too wired for sleep. Where will we go? Clara asked. There's a place, Kohana said slowly. Sacred Springs, high in the mountains, where Ayana's people once wintered. The whites don't know of it, and even most Comanche have forgotten. We can be safe there. For how long? He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the truth. They would always be running. A white woman with a Comanche man. A child between two worlds. There was no place in either society for what they were becoming. But then he took her hand, lacing their fingers together. For as long as we need. Forever, perhaps. Forever, Clara repeated, tasting the word. It should have frightened her, this life of exile and uncertainty. Instead, she felt only a fierce joy. She had found something worth fighting for, worth any hardship. As the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Clara allowed herself to hope. They were hunted, yes, homeless in any traditional sense, but they were together, and they were free. I love you, she said quietly, the first time either had spoken the words. Kohana's hand tightened on hers. And I you, more than is wise. When has wisdom ever brought happiness? He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. True words. Very well. Let us be foolish together. They woke Chaitin and continued their journey, climbing higher into mountains where the air was thin and cold, where eagles soared and the works of man seemed very far away. Behind them lay danger and pursuit. Ahead lay uncertainty and hardship. But they rode together, and for now, that was enough. The sacred springs lay hidden in a bowl of mountains, accessible only through a narrow passage that seemed to disappear into solid rock until you were almost upon it. Steam rose from the hot pools, creating an otherworldly mist that clung to the surrounding pines. It was a place out of time, untouched by the westward march of civilization. The people say the spirits live here, Kohana explained as they made camp near the largest pool. In the before times, warriors came here to heal from battle wounds. Women came to ensure healthy children. Clara understood why it felt sacred. There was something about the place, the silence broken only by bubbling water, the way the mist made everything dreamlike, the sense of being held by the earth itself. They settled into a routine quickly. The location provided everything they needed: fresh water, game, shelter from the wind in natural caves worn smooth by centuries of use. Chayton explored every inch of their new home with the fearlessness of childhood, reporting back his discoveries with bright-eyed excitement. "There's pictures on the cave walls," he told Clara one morning. "Old pictures. Papa says his people made them long ago." Clara followed him to see. The photographs were indeed ancient. Hunters and buffalo, spirals and handprints, stories told in ochre and charcoal. She traced them gently with her fingers, thinking of all the generations who had sheltered here before them. "Your ancestors were artists," she told Chayton. "What's ancestors?" "The people who came before, your grandparents' grandparents, and even before that." The boy considered this. "Are you my children's ancestor?" The question hit Clara like a physical blow. She glanced at Kohana, who had followed them into the cave, but his expression was unreadable in the dim light. I suppose I would be," she said carefully. "If you have children someday." "Good," Chayton said decisively, and scampered off to explore more of the cave. That night, as they sat by their small fire while Chayton slept, Kohana broke the silence. "He sees the future more clearly than we do." "What do you mean?" "Children. A life beyond running and hiding." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "I have not thought past keeping you both alive each day." Clara moved closer to him, taking his hand. "Maybe we should think beyond surviving. I mean," he looked at their joined hands, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "What would you want if we could have anything?" "A home," Clara said without hesitation. "Not just a shelter, but a real home. A garden, perhaps a few chickens. Somewhere Chayton could grow up without fear, could choose his own path. A place between worlds," Kohana mused. "Neither white nor Indian. Our own world. Then," he pulled her against his side, "you dream big for a woman hiding in sacred mountains. Someone has to—" She tilted her face up to his. "What would you want?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "To see you in a dress you didn't have to mend 10 times. To watch Chayton become a man. To grow old without looking over my shoulder." They were simple dreams, Clara thought, the kind most people took for granted. But for them, they might as well wish for the moon. One afternoon, while washing clothes in the hot springs, Clara felt a familiar cramping in her belly. Her monthly bleeding had arrived, always irregular since her time with the traders, but still coming. She dealt with it matter-of-factly, using the soft moss and cloth strips she'd learned to prepare. But Kohana noticed her discomfort. "You are in pain?" "It's nothing, just women's troubles." Understanding dawned in his eyes. Among his people, she knew, women in their moontime stayed apart. But here there was nowhere to go. He surprised her by brewing a tea from herbs he'd gathered, the same his mother had taught him to make for his sister. "For the pain," he said gruffly, not meeting her eyes. The tea helped, but what helped more was his quiet care, keeping Chayton occupied so she could rest, ensuring she had the choicest portions at meals, sitting beside her in comfortable silence as she dozed against his shoulder. But that night, she woke to find him sitting at the cave entrance, staring out at nothing. "What troubles you?" she asked, wrapping a blanket around herself and joining him. "You still bleed," he said quietly, "even after what they did to you." Clara stiffened. She'd told him, in halting words one night, about the doctor at the trading post who had examined her roughly and proclaimed her damaged goods after the repeated assaults. The man had said she'd likely never conceive, that her womb had been injured beyond repair. "Yes," she said simply, "but it means nothing." You heard what that doctor said. Doctors can be wrong. Not about this. She tried to keep the bitterness from her voice. I felt things tear during the worst of it. I'm broken inside. Kohana. He turned to her then, cupping her face in his hands. You are not broken. You are the strongest woman I have known. And even if your womb never quickens, you are whole. You are enough. You have only one child, Clara whispered. Don't you want more? I want you, he said fiercely. Only you. Chaitin has a mother again. That is gift enough. They held each other in the darkness, two wounded souls finding solace. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that she was denying him something vital, something any other woman could give him. As winter deepened, they prepared carefully. Kohana hunted while the game was still moving, smoking meat in the ancient way. Clara gathered roots and dried berries, storing them in baskets she wove from willow. They collected firewood until they had great stacks of it protected under overhangs. One day, while Kohana was hunting, Clara decided to explore the farthest hot spring, the one partly hidden behind a fall of rocks. The water there was cooler than the others, comfortable for bathing. She had just undressed when she heard movement behind her. Terror flooded through her as she spun, grabbing for her knife. But it was only a deer, a young doe that had come to drink. They stared at each other, both frozen, until the doe turned and bounded away. Clara sank into the water on shaking legs. Even here, in this safest of places, she couldn't fully relax. The traders had left marks on more than just her body. When she returned to camp, she found Kohana already back, skinning a rabbit while Chaitin practiced with his small bow. The domestic scene made her heart ache with longing for this to be permanent, to never have to run again. That night, the first snow began to fall. They watched from the cave entrance as the world turned white and silent. Chaitin danced with excitement. He remembered snow from previous winters, but never this much, this beautiful. Tell the snow story. Papa, he demanded, settling between them. Kohana obliged, speaking of the winter buffalo hunts of his youth, of how the people followed the herds through the snow, of the celebration when a hunt was successful. His voice painted pictures of a life that was gone forever, but in his telling, it lived again. Later, when Chaitin slept, Clara asked, Do you miss it? Your old life? Parts of it, he admitted. The brotherhood of warriors, the certainty of knowing your place in the world, but that life was already ending before Ayana died. The buffalo nearly gone, the band scattered, the old ways becoming memory. I'm sorry, Clara said, meaning it. My people destroyed yours. Some did. Others just wanted to live. Like you. He pulled her close. The past is gone. We must look forward now. But the past had a way of intruding. A few days later, Chaitin came running from his explorations with news that made Clara's blood run cold. Horses coming, many horses. Kohana grabbed his rifle and moved to a vantage point. Clara close behind. Through the swirling snow, they could see riders approaching, not the rough bounty hunters, but blue-uniformed cavalry, at least a dozen of them. How did they find us? Clara whispered. They know these mountains better than I hoped, Kohana said grimly. Or they have Indian scouts. The soldiers made camp at the entrance to the passage, clearly planning to search systematically. There would be no quick escape this time, not with the snow starting to fall heavily. The back caves, Kohana decided. There's another way out, but it's difficult. We leave the horses. They'd never make it. They packed swiftly, taking only what they could carry. Clara's heart broke at leaving their carefully gathered supplies. But survival mattered more than comfort. The passage Kohana led them through was barely wide enough for a person, and in places they had to crawl. Chaitin was brave, not complaining even when the rocks scraped his hands. Behind them, they could hear echoing shouts. The soldiers had found their camp. They emerged on the far side of the mountain as darkness fell. The snow was falling thick now, which would hide their tracks, but also make travel treacherous. They were on foot in a blizzard, with minimal supplies and a child to protect. There's a trading post, Kohana said, having to raise his voice over the wind. 2 days north, Mexican territory. They don't ask questions if you can pay. 2 days in this weather seemed impossible, but they had no choice. They walked through the night, Kohana carrying Chayton when the boy tired. Clara's feet went numb, then painful, then numb again. She focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on not becoming a burden. Dawn brought no relief, just gray light through continuing snow. They sheltered briefly in a grove of pines, sharing what little food they'd brought. Chayton was quiet, his usual chatter stilled by exhaustion and cold. "I'm scared, Pia," he admitted in a small voice. Clara pulled him close. "I know, sweetheart, but your papa will get us through. He always has." Kohana met her eyes over the boy's head, and she saw her own fear reflected there, but also determination. He would die before he let harm come to them. They pushed on. The second night was worse than the first. The snow had stopped, but the temperature plummeted. They huddled together for warmth, afraid to sleep, afraid they wouldn't wake. It was Chayton who spotted the lights first. "Look, Papa, fires!" The trading post sat in a valley, a collection of rough buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade. Smoke rose from chimneys, promising warmth. But Kohana hesitated at the edge of the trees. "We don't know who's there," he said. "Could be soldiers, could be worse." "We can't stay out here," Clara said through chattering teeth. "Chayton needs warmth, food." In the end, it was the sight of his son's blue-tinged lips that decided him. They approached cautiously, Kohana's hand on his rifle. The post was run by a Mexican trader named Diego, a man who'd clearly learned that survival on the frontier meant not asking questions. His eyes took in their mixed group, white woman, Comanche warrior, half-blood child, but all he said was, "You have money?" Kohana produced a small leather pouch, gold coins, taken long ago from soldiers who no longer needed them. Diego bit one, nodded, and showed them to a small room at the back of the main building. "Food and supplies in the morning," he said. "Tonight, you rest. Nobody here but traders and fools, and I don't rent rooms to cavalry." The room was bare, but warm. They collapsed onto the straw mattresses, too exhausted for anything but sleep. Clara pulled Chayton between her and Kohana, needing to feel them both close, both alive. She woke hours later to find Kohana sitting by the small window, watching the courtyard. "Sleep," she told him. "I'll watch for a while." "The storm is breaking," he said instead of arguing. "We can travel tomorrow if—" "Kohana." She moved to stand beside him. "We can't keep doing this, running every time they find us. Chayton deserves better. What would you have me do?" His voice was raw. "I cannot change what I am. You cannot change what you are. Together, we will always be hunted. Then maybe—" She swallowed hard. "Maybe we shouldn't be together." He turned on her, eyes blazing. "You would leave? If it kept you and Chayton safe." He kissed her hard, cutting off her words. When they broke apart, both breathing raggedly, he gripped her shoulders. "Never say that again. We stay together, always." "But—" "No, I have lost too much already. I will not lose you to fear." His hands gentled, moving to frame her face. "We will find a way. Perhaps further west, where law is less settled. Perhaps south into Mexico. Somewhere." Clara leaned into him, drawing strength from his certainty. Outside, the wind howled. But here in this small room, they had created their own shelter against the storm. "All right," she whispered. "Together." They returned to the mattress, curling around Chayton's small form. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But tonight, they were warm and safe and together. In the morning, they would plan. Diego had mentioned settlements in the far mountains where mixed families were more common, where a man's worth was measured by his work rather than his blood. It would mean starting over again, but they were becoming expert at that. Clara fell asleep to the sound of Kohana's heartbeat, strong and steady beneath her ear. Whatever came, They would face it as they had everything else, together, protecting the small, fierce love they had built from the ashes of their separate griefs. The candle burned low, casting dancing shadows on rough wooden walls. Outside, the last of the storm spent itself against the mountains, and in a trader's back room, 3 unlikely souls held tight to each other and to hope, refusing to let go of either. The news reached them at Diego's trading post 3 days later. A grizzled fur trapper, warming himself by the fire, spoke casually of the cavalry patrol that had given up searching the sacred mountains. "Heard they're heading back to Fort Concho," he said, spitting tobacco juice into the fire. "Looking for some white woman supposed to be kidnapped by Indians. Colonel's offering a reward, $500 for information leading to her rescue." Clara kept her face carefully neutral as she served the men coffee, but her hands trembled. Kohana, sitting in the shadows, caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Stay calm." $500. Another trader whistled. "That's a lot of money. She must be somebody important." "Nah," the trapper said. "But there's some Mexican trader wants her found real bad, adding his own money to the pot. Says she knows something that could hang him." Clara's blood ran cold. So her suspicions were correct. The trader who'd held her had killed someone, and her testimony could condemn him. She wasn't just a runaway to be recaptured. She was a threat to be eliminated. That night, in their small room, Kohana paced like a caged wolf. "We cannot stay here. Too many eyes, too many people tempted by gold. Diego has been kind. Diego is a businessman. When the reward grows large enough—" He didn't need to finish. Clara sank onto the mattress where Chayton slept peacefully. "Where can we go? Winter is full upon us. We barely survived the journey here." So, Kohana knelt before her, taking her hands. "There is one place, but it would mean leaving everything behind, this territory, any hope of returning to your people someday. Tell me." "California. The mountains near the great ocean. I traveled there once, years ago, trading horses. There are valleys where Mexican settlers and Indians have intermarried for generations. A mixed family would draw less notice." "California," Clara repeated. "It might as well be the moon. How would we even get there?" "There are ways, difficult ways." He squeezed her hands. "It would be dangerous. Months of travel through desert and mountain. Chayton would be safer there than here." Clara finished. "We have to try." But first, they needed supplies. Money. Information. Kohana took to haunting the trading post's main room, listening to travelers' stories, learning the routes west. Clara helped Diego's wife with cooking and cleaning, earning their keep while gleaning what information she could from loose-tongued traders. One evening, as Clara served dinner, a new group arrived. Hard-looking men who made her skin crawl with recognition. Not the same ones who'd hunted them, but cut from the same cloth. Bounty hunters. "We're looking for a white woman," their leader announced to the room at large. "Traveling with a Comanche buck and a half-breed brat. Anybody seen such a group?" Clara forced herself to keep ladling stew, though every instinct screamed at her to run. In the corner, Kohana had gone perfectly still. "What's she look like?" Diego asked casually, counting coins behind his bar. "Young, blonde, pretty enough before the Indians got her. Probably looking rough now. The buck's tall, got a scar here." He drew a line across his jaw. Clara's heart sank. Kohana did have such a scar. A memento from a long-ago fight. But Diego just shrugged. "Lots of Indians got scars. Lots of white women in these parts, too. You might try the settlement south of here." The bounty hunter's eyes narrowed. "We paying good money for information. Then spend it somewhere else," Diego said flatly. "I run a trading post, not a spy ring." The men grumbled but settled in for the night. Clara escaped to their room as soon as she could, finding Kohana already there with Chayton. "We leave tonight," he said without preamble. "In the dark, in winter. Better than in chains." He was already packing their few belongings. "Diego gave us time, but those men are not fools. Come morning, they'll start asking harder questions." Clara looked at Chayton, drowsing against his father's shoulder. The boy had been so happy these past days, playing with Diego's children, sleeping in a real bed. Now they would thrust him back into danger and uncertainty. As if reading her thoughts, Kohana said softly, "He is stronger than you think. He is his mother's son as much as mine." They slipped out through a back window an hour before dawn. When the guards were drowsiest, Diego had left supplies in the stable: blankets, food, ammunition, payment for their work, he would claim if asked. Clara silently blessed the trader's careful neutrality. They rode hard through the pre-dawn darkness, taking paths Kohana had scouted in their days at the post. By the time the sun crested the mountains, they were miles away. Though Clara knew it wasn't far enough, men driven by greed could track far and fast. For days they traveled, pushing deeper into the wilderness. Kohana used every trick he knew, doubling back, riding through streams, laying false trails. Chayton, sensing the urgency, stayed quiet and uncomplaining even when the pace exhausted him. On the 5th night, they made cold camp in a grove of aspens. No fire, no hot food, just pemmican and stream water. As Clara chewed the tough dried meat, she noticed Kohana staring into the darkness, tension radiating from every line of his body. "What is it?" she whispered. "We're being followed. Have been for 2 days." Her heart lurched. The bounty hunters? No, one rider, staying back but keeping pace. He shifted, hand moving to his rifle. Could be a scout for a larger group. Or someone else with interest in us. They broke camp before dawn, but as they prepared to mount, a voice called out from the trees. "Hold there! Swift wind! I come in peace!" Kohana spun, rifle raised, as a figure emerged from the shadows. Clara gasped. It was an Indian, but dressed in white man's clothes, cotton shirt, wool trousers, boots. He held his hands up, showing them empty. "Who are you?" Kohana demanded in Comanche. The stranger answered in the same language, then switched to English for Clara's benefit. "I am Joseph Littlefoot, scout for the army. Yes, but not here on army business." "Then why follow us?" Joseph's eyes moved to Clara. Then Chayton. "Because I know what it is to be caught between worlds. My wife was Mexican. The fever took her last spring. But I remember how people looked at us, at our children." Kohana didn't lower his rifle. "What do you want?" "To help, if you'll let me." Joseph reached slowly into his saddlebags, producing a rolled paper. "Map to California, the southern route, through Apache territory. Dangerous. But the army won't follow there. Neither will most bounty hunters." "Why would you help us?" Clara asked. Finding her voice, Joseph's smile was sad. "Because someone helped us once. A Comanche warrior, actually. Guided us to safety when my wife's people cast her out for marrying an Indian." He looked at Kohana. "Maybe I'm repaying an old debt. Maybe I just think love deserves a chance, whatever color it comes in." Kohana studied him for a long moment, then slowly lowered his rifle. "The Apache will not welcome us." "No, but if you're careful, you can avoid them. The map shows water sources, safe camps. It's the route my brother-in-law uses for trading. He's in California now, place called Valle de la Luna, Valley of the Moon, mixed settlement, mostly Mexican and Indian. You mention my name. He'll help you get settled." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. After so much persecution, this unexpected kindness overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she managed. Joseph nodded, then mounted his horse. "Best get moving. Those hunters at Diego's are planning to head this way tomorrow. I laid some false tracks leading north, but they won't be fooled for long." "Why not come with us?" Clara asked impulsively. "If you have no one." "Kind of you, ma'am. But my children are at the mission school. Can't leave them, even if—" He trailed off, pain flickering across his face. "Just get yourself safe. That boy deserves a chance to grow up loved." He rode away without looking back. Kohana studied the map by the growing light, tracing routes with his finger. "It's good," he said finally. "Better than what I knew. With this, we might actually make it." Clara finished. They pushed harder now, following Joseph's route. The landscape changed as they descended from the mountains, pine forests giving way to scrub desert, water becoming scarce and precious. They rationed carefully, always saving the best for Chayton. One blistering afternoon, as they rested in the shade of a red rock formation, Clara noticed Chayton drawing patterns in the dust with a stick. She recognized them, the symbols from the cave walls at the sacred springs. "You remember those?" she asked. He nodded solemnly. "Papa says we must remember where we come from, even when we go somewhere new." Clara's throat tightened. This boy, not yet 9 years old, already understood exile in ways that broke her heart. She pulled him close, pressing a kiss to his dusty hair. "We'll make new memories too," she promised. "Happy ones." "With you and Papa?" "Always." Kohana returned from scouting, his expression grim. "Riders to the east, too far to see clearly, but moving parallel to us? Apache? Perhaps, or others." He looked at the sky, calculating. "There's a box canyon on the map, half a day ahead. Defensible. We'll make for it." They rode through the heat of the day, something Kohana would normally never do. Clara could feel the horses struggling, but they had no choice. As the sun began to sink, painting the desert in shades of blood and gold, they reached the canyon Joseph had marked. It was perfect. Narrow entrance, high walls, a spring-fed pool at the back. They could defend here if needed, rest the horses, refill their water. As they made camp, Kohana climbed to a high ledge to keep watch. Clara settled Chayton with their blankets, then climbed up to join her man. "See anything?" "Dust, far off. Could be nothing." But his hand rested on his rifle. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. After a while, Kohana spoke. "Are you sorry for choosing this life?" Clara considered the question seriously. "I'm tired, scared. I miss having a real home." She took his hand. "But sorry? No, never." He lifted their joined hands, kissing her knuckles. "When we reach California, I want to marry you, in whatever way your people require." Clara's heart stuttered. "Kohana, I know it may not be legal, a white woman and a Comanche, but in that valley Joseph spoke of, perhaps such things matter less." His voice dropped. "I want you to have what protection my name can give. Want Chayton to—" She silenced him with a kiss. "Yes," she breathed against his lips. "Yes, of course." They held each other as the desert night wrapped around them, speaking in whispers of the future they would build. A small farm, perhaps. Chayton in school, learning to read and write in English and Spanish, both. Maybe, if they were very lucky, more children, adopted if need be, since Clara's body seemed unable to conceive. "I want to give you a baby," she confessed in the darkness. "It hurts that I can't." "You have given me back my life," Kohana said fiercely. "You have given my son a mother. That is miracle enough." Morning brought unwelcome clarity. The dust cloud was closer, resolving into distinct riders. Not Apache, their movements were wrong. White men, then, still pursuing. "How?" Clara asked desperately. "We were so careful. Gold makes men persistent," Kohana said grimly. "And clever. They must have split up. Cast a wide net." He made a decision that stunned her. "Take Chayton. Ride west, fast as you can. The map shows—" "No." The word came out sharp as a blade. "We stay together." "Clara, no!" She gripped his arms. "You promised. Together. Always. I won't leave you to face them alone. And I won't want you captured or killed. Then we'd better make sure neither happens." She managed a shaky smile. "Besides, you need me. I'm getting to be a fair shot with that rifle." His laugh was pained, but he pulled her close. "Stubborn woman. You wouldn't love me any other way." They prepared for siege, filling every container with water, checking weapons, explaining to Chayton in gentle terms that bad men were coming but Papa and Pia would keep him safe. The boy nodded solemnly, trust shining in his dark eyes. As the sun climbed higher, the riders approached the canyon mouth. Clara counted 8. Too many for Cohanna to handle alone, even with the advantage of high ground. Her hands were steady as she checked the load on the rifle he'd taught her to use. From their position behind the rocks, she could hear the men talking, arguing about whether to enter the canyon. Their leader, she recognized his voice from the trading post, was insisting they had their quarry trapped. Could be anybody in there. One protested, "This is Apache country." "It's them," the leader said flatly. "That breed scout at Diego's finally talked when we made it worth his while. Told us about the map, the route. They're in there, and that woman's worth a fortune to us." Clara felt sick. Someone had betrayed Joseph, forced him to reveal what he knew. She prayed the kind scout was still alive. "Here they come." Cohanna breathed. The riders entered the canyon slowly, weapons drawn, scanning the walls. Clara sighted down her rifle barrel as Cohanna had taught her, picking her target. Her finger rested on the trigger, waiting for his signal. Then Chayton sneezed. It was tiny, muffled by his hand, but in the echoing canyon it was enough. The men's heads snapped up, searching for the source. "There!" one shouted, pointing toward their position. Everything happened at once. Cohanna fired, his shot taking the lead rider from his horse. Clara squeezed her trigger. Feeling the rifle buck against her shoulder, another man fell. The canyon erupted in gunfire, bullets whining off rocks, the horses screaming and plunging. "Stay down," Cohanna ordered, pushing Chayton flat as he reloaded. Clara's hands shook as she fumbled for another cartridge. Below, the bounty hunters had taken cover, returning fire. 6 left, to their 2 guns and limited ammunition. The siege had begun. The gunfire echoed through the canyon until Clara's ears rang. She pressed herself flat against the rocks, Chayton trembling beneath her protective arm. Cohanna fired methodically, making every shot count, but their ammunition wouldn't last forever. "You in there!" The bounty hunter's voice carried over the sporadic shooting. "We know who you are, woman. Come out peaceful-like, and nobody else needs to die." Clara's jaw clenched. She knew what awaited her if she surrendered. Not rescue, but return to bondage. Or worse, if the Mexican trader wanted her silenced permanently. "The lady's not interested," Cohanna called back, his voice carrying deadly calm. "That you Indian? You're a long way from Comanche lands. Hand her over and you can take your brat and go." Cohanna's answer was another shot that sent rock chips flying near the speaker's hiding spot. As the sun climbed higher, the situation grew desperate. The hunters had them pinned, and the heat in the canyon was becoming oppressive. Their water was holding, but Chayton was frightened, trying so hard to be brave for his father. "Papa," he whispered during a lull. "Are we going to die?" "No, little falcon." Cohanna's voice was firm. "I won't let that happen." But Clara could see the truth in his eyes. They were trapped, outnumbered, and running low on cartridges. She made a decision that turned her stomach but might be their only chance. "I need to try something," she told Cohanna. "Trust me." Before he could stop her, she called out, "Wait, I'll make a deal." "Clara, no," Cohanna hissed. "I'm listening," the bounty hunter replied. "I know why Valdez wants me dead." Clara shouted, "I saw him murder his partner. I have proof hidden, papers that show he's been stealing from his investors, worth thousands." Silence greeted this announcement. She could imagine the hunters calculating, greed warring with their promised bounty. "You're lying," the leader finally said, but uncertainty colored his voice. "Am I? Why else would he pay so much for a used woman? Think about it. $500 just to silence me? What's he hiding that's worth that much?" Cohanna caught on to her ploy. "She speaks truth." He called, "We have the papers. Valdez's own writing, very careless." More silence. Then heated discussion among the hunters, too low to make out words. Clara held her breath. "All right," the leader said finally. "Show us these papers. Then we talk. First you back off." Clara countered. "Out of the canyon. We'll meet in the open. Fair-like." "Like hell." The argument was cut short by new gunfire, but not aimed at them. Shouts of alarm rose from the hunters as bullets rained down from the canyon rim. Clara looked up to see riders silhouetted against the sky. Apache warriors, painted for war. "Oh God," she breathed. The bounty hunters forgot about their quarry. Turning their weapons upward, the Apache had the high ground and numbers. In minutes, the canyon became a slaughter field. "Now," Kohana said urgently. "While they're fighting each other." He grabbed Chayton while Clara snatched their essential supplies. They slipped along the canyon wall, keeping to shadows, as the battle raged behind them. One of the bounty hunters, fleeing the Apache fire, nearly ran into them. His eyes widened in recognition. "You!" Kohana's knife ended his words. Clara looked away from the dying man, focusing on getting Chayton to safety. They reached their hidden horses just as Apache warriors began descending into the canyon to finish any survivors. "Ride," Kohana commanded. "Don't look back." They fled across the desert as the sun reached its zenith. Behind them, smoke rose from the canyon, the Apache burning bodies. Perhaps, or the bounty hunters' supplies. Clara didn't want to know. They rode until the horses stumbled with exhaustion, finally taking shelter in a cluster of wind-carved rocks as darkness fell. No fire tonight. The Apache might track them, might consider them enemies too. "Will they follow?" Clara asked as they huddled together. "Perhaps we're in their territory uninvited." Kohana's arms tightened around her and Chayton. "But they may be satisfied with the hunters. Apache have no love for such men." Chayton whimpered in his sleep, reliving the day's terror. Clara stroked his hair, humming softly until he settled. "Your trick with the papers was clever," Kohana murmured. "Quick thinking. Desperate thinking." Clara corrected. "But it might have worked if the Apache hadn't come." "Yes." He was quiet a moment. "Perhaps they did us a favor. Those men would never have let us go, papers or no papers." They dozed fitfully, taking turns watching. At dawn, Kohana scouted their back trail and returned with cautious relief. No sign of pursuit. The Apache must have moved on. They traveled more carefully now, avoiding skylines, camping dry. The desert tried to kill them in a dozen ways. Scorpions in their bedding, water holes that turned out to be alkali poison, heat that made the air shimmer like water. But they persevered. And gradually the landscape began to change. Scrub gave way to grassland, then scattered oaks. The air grew cooler, carrying a hint of moisture. "The sea," Kohana said one evening, breathing deep. "We're getting close." 2 days later, they crested a ridge and saw it, a valley cupped between hills, green and gold in the afternoon light. A small settlement clustered around a plaza, smoke rising peacefully from chimneys. Valle de la Luna, Valley of the Moon. "Is that it?" Chayton asked, wonder in his voice. "Our new home?" "Maybe," Kohana said carefully. "We'll see." They approached cautiously, but the few people they passed barely glanced at them. Clara saw why. The population was indeed mixed, every shade of brown and tan. Indian features blended with Spanish, a few blacks, even some Chinese, a place where their small family wouldn't stand out. At the trading post, every frontier settlement had one. Kohana asked after Joseph's brother-in-law. The proprietor, a stout Mexican woman, brightened. "Ah, Miguel Reyes. Say, he has the ranch north of town. You are friends of Jose? He helped us," Kohana said simply. Her expression grew solemn. "Jose is a good man. Too bad about the trouble." Clara's heart sank. Trouble? The army. They say he deserted, helping some fugitives. But Miguel, he doesn't believe it. Jose would never abandon his children. She shook her head. "You go see Miguel. He'll be glad for news of his brother." They found the Reyes ranch easily enough. A modest spread with a small adobe house, corrals, a garden already showing spring green. Miguel himself answered their knock. A compact man with graying hair and kind eyes that sharpened when Kohana mentioned Joseph. "You saw him? When? Is he well?" They told their story, carefully edited. Miguel's expression grew grave as he understood the implications. So they forced him to tell about the map. he said. That explains the desertion charges. They couldn't admit a scout helped fugitives willingly. He studied them. You're the ones he helped. It wasn't a question. Clara nodded, too tired for pretense. Miguel stepped aside. Then you're welcome here. Any friend of Jose's is family. The kindness, after so much hardship, nearly undid her. Clara felt tears threaten as Miguel called for his wife, introduced them to a house full of children, insisted they stay for a meal that stretched into evening. You need work? Miguel asked Kohana as they sat on the porch afterward, watching Chayton play with the Reyes children. I could use help with the horses. You know horses. I know horses, Kohana confirmed. Good. There's an empty cabin at the far pasture. Needs work, but it's solid. You could stay there. Clara and Kohana exchanged glances. It was so much more than they dared hope for. We have no money, Clara said. The bounty hunters. Bah! Miguel waved this away. You work. I pay. Simple. Besides, his expression grew sly. My Maria has been saying we need a school. Too many children growing up without letters. You were a teacher, no? How did you... Jose's letter. He sent one before the trouble. Said you taught school back east. Clara's throat tightened. Even in his own danger, Joseph had tried to smooth their way. I am. I'd be honored to teach. Then it settled. Miguel stood, offering his hand to Kohana. Welcome to Valle de la Luna. The cabin was indeed rough. One room, dirt floor, gaps in the walls that let in wind. But it was theirs. As they stood in the doorway, Chayton running ahead to explore. Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd almost forgotten its name. Hope. It needs everything, Kohana said, surveying their new home. We'll fix it, Clara said firmly. Together. He pulled her against his side. No more running? No more running. That night, they slept on the floor, covered by borrowed blankets that smelled of sage and soap. Through the gaps in the walls, Clara could see stars, hear nightbirds calling. Somewhere in the distance, a guitar played, and voices rose in Spanish song. Clara, Kohana said softly in the darkness. In the morning, I want to find the priest. She turned to face him, though she could barely see his features. The priest? To marry us. Properly. Miguel says Father Francisco doesn't care about such things as race, only that people love truly. Clara's eyes filled. You want to marry me in a church? I want to marry you every way possible, he said fiercely. Indian way, white way, Mexican way, so no one can ever say you're not my wife. I've been your wife since the night you held me through my nightmares, Clara whispered. Still, I want the word said. Want Chayton to see it, to know his parents chose each other before God and man. Yes, Clara breathed. Yes, of course. They made love then, quietly because of the thin walls and sleeping child, but with a tenderness born of survived trials and chosen commitment. Afterward, they lay entwined, planning their new life in whispers. A garden first, Clara insisted. Vegetables for eating, flowers for beauty. Kohana would work with Miguel's horses, maybe start breeding his own stock eventually. Clara would teach school, bringing education to the valley's children. They would add rooms to the cabin as they could afford it. Maybe, God willing, fill those rooms with more children, adopted or fostered, since Clara's womb remained stubbornly empty despite their love. I saw how you looked at the Reyes children, Kohana murmured. There are always orphans on the frontier, children who need parents. You wouldn't mind? Mind giving Chayton brothers and sisters? Mind filling our home with laughter? He kissed her forehead. Never. As dawn broke over their valley, Clara rose and stepped outside. The air was cool and sweet, mist rising from the grass. In the distance, she could see the ocean, a line of silver on the horizon. She thought of the girl she'd been in Ohio, full of dreams of Western adventure. That girl had died in a trader's camp, she'd thought. But perhaps she'd only been transformed, tempered by trial into something stronger. Kohana joined her, wrapping a blanket around them both. They stood together, watching their new world wake. "No regrets?" he asked. Clara thought of all she'd lost: innocence, family, the life she'd planned. Then she thought of what she'd gained: love, courage, a family chosen rather than born to, a man who saw her scars and called them beautiful, a son who called her mother in 2 languages, a community that judged by heart rather than blood. "No regrets," she said, and meant it. Chayton emerged, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is this really our home now?" "Yes, little falcon," Kohana said. "This is home." The boy whooped and ran toward the pasture where horses grazed. His parents followed more slowly, hands linked, planning the day's work. There was so much to do: walls to repair, a floor to lay, a life to build. But they had survived the hunting, the desert, the hatred of 2 worlds that said their love was wrong. They had found sanctuary in this valley where the moon rose full and bright, where mixed families were common as California poppies, where the past mattered less than the future. Clara squeezed Kohana's hand and got to work. They had a home to make. Spring came to Valle de la Luna in a riot of wildflowers and gentle rains. The cabin that had seemed so rough 6 months ago was now a true home. Wooden floors laid with Miguel's help, walls chinked tight against the wind, glass windows that caught the morning light. Clara's garden flourished beside the door, beans climbing poles and tomatoes growing heavy on the vine. "Mama Clara, look!" Chayton called from where he practiced with his lasso. His English was perfect now, though he still spoke Comanche with his father in private moments. "I almost caught the fence post." "Very good," Clara praised, pausing in her weeding. "Soon you'll be helping your papa with the horses." Inside the cabin, she could hear Kohana working on a cradle. Not for their own child. Her monthly blood still came with stubborn regularity, but for the infant they would soon foster. Maria Reyes had told them about the baby, born to a young Indian woman who died in childbirth. The father, unknown. The local mission had the child but needed a family. "You have love to give," Maria had said simply. "The baby needs love." Now they waited only for Father Francisco to complete the arrangements. Clara touched her belly unconsciously, feeling the familiar pang of emptiness, but it was softer now, the grief tempered by purpose. She might not bear children, but she could raise them, love them. That was gift enough. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention. Not unusual. Kohana's skill with horses had become well known, and ranchers often brought difficult animals for him to gentle. But something in the urgency of the hoofbeats made her straighten, hand moving instinctively to the rifle just inside the door. 3 riders appeared on the trail, Miguel in the lead, his face grim. Behind him rode the sheriff from the larger town of San Luis Obispo, and a man Clara didn't recognize. "Kohana!" she called, and he emerged from the cabin, instantly alert. Miguel dismounted first. "I'm sorry, my friends, this man has come from Texas. He says he has legal claim on Mrs. Clara." The stranger stepped forward, producing papers from his coat. He was well-dressed, prosperous-looking, with cold gray eyes that made Clara's skin crawl, though she'd never seen him before. "Mrs. Clara Sullivan," he said formally. "I'm James Morrison, attorney at law. I represent your late husband's family." Clara's world tilted. "My what?" "Your husband, Thomas Sullivan, who you married in Fort Worth 2 years ago." His smile was thin. "Imagine the family's surprise to learn you were alive. They'd assumed you died in the Indian raid that destroyed the stagecoach. But then rumors reached them. A white woman living with a savage, claiming to be unmarried." "I don't know what you're talking about," Clara said, but her voice shook, because she did know. "Oh, God, she knew." "No." Morrison produced more papers. "Marriage certificate, signed and witnessed. Your signature, is it not?" With trembling hands, Clara took the document, and there it was, her real name, Emma Catherine Mills, signed on a marriage certificate dated 2 years prior, but the groom's name, "This is forged," she said flatly. "I never married anyone named Thomas Sullivan." 3 witnesses say otherwise. Morrison replied smoothly. Respectable citizens who attended your wedding. And now your husband's family wants their property returned. Property? Kohana's voice was dangerous. Texas law is quite clear. A married woman's property belongs to her husband. Upon his death, sadly, Thomas died last year, it passes to his family, including any earnings she might have accumulated. Clara understood then. This was another bounty hunter, just dressed in law instead of leather. Someone had found her real name, created a false marriage, and was using it to claim her legally. Even if this were true, the sheriff said uncomfortably. California isn't Texas. We don't recognize. The full faith and credit clause of the Constitution says you must recognize legal marriages from other states. Morrison interrupted. I have a court order for Mrs. Sullivan's return to Texas to settle her husband's estate. I'm not going anywhere, Clara said firmly. This is fraud, and you know it. Morrison's expression hardened. Then I'll have to invoke other laws. Namely, that this woman has been living in sin with a savage, corrupting a minor child, committing adultery against her lawful husband. Kohana moved so fast Morrison didn't have time to react. One moment the lawyer was talking. The next, he was on the ground with Kohana's knife at his throat. Call me savage again, Kohana said softly. Kohana, no! Clara caught his arm. This was what Morrison wanted. Violence they could use against them. The sheriff had his gun half drawn, but Miguel stopped him. Easy. Everyone, let's talk this through. Kohana released Morrison and stepped back, but his hand remained on his knife. The lawyer scrambled up, brushing dust from his suit. You see, he said to the sheriff. Violent. Dangerous. This woman needs protection from men like you. Clara interrupted. She turned to the sheriff. Check his story. Telegraph Fort Worth. You'll find no record of any marriage between Emma Mills and Thomas Sullivan because it never happened. That will take weeks. Morrison protested. Meanwhile, this woman continues to live in sin. I'll marry her today. Kohana said flatly. Here, now. Morrison smiled triumphantly. Bigamy is also a crime. They were trapped. Clara could see it in the sheriff's uncomfortable expression. The law, even fraudulent law, had power, and Morrison knew exactly how to use it. 3 days, the sheriff decided finally. I'll telegraph Fort Worth. Check this story. Until then, he looked apologetically at Clara. You'll need to come to town. Ma'am, stay at the boarding house, just until we sort this out. No, Kohana said immediately. It's that, or I arrest her now. The sheriff said quietly, I'm trying to be fair here. Clara felt the walls closing in, just as they had in the traders' camp. But this time she wasn't alone. She had people who would fight for her. I'll go, she said, ignoring Kohana's sound of protest. But my family comes with me. The savage and his brat, Morrison began. This time it was Miguel who moved, his fist connecting solidly with Morrison's jaw. The lawyer went down again, blood streaming from his nose. Apologies, Sheriff, Miguel said calmly. My hand slipped. Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tug at her lips. The sheriff sighed deeply. Everyone calm down. Miss, the lady can bring her family to town. The boarding house has rooms. 3 days. Then we'll know the truth. They packed quickly, Clara's hands shaking as she folded clothes. Kohana caught her shoulders, turning her to face him. We run, he said. Now, take Chayton and disappear. No, Clara gripped his hands. No more running. We fight this legally. Morrison made a mistake. He overplayed his hand. When the sheriff finds no record of this marriage, and if he's bribed officials in Fort Worth, if papers appear, Clara had no answer for that. They both knew how easily records could be forged. Witnesses bought. The boarding house in San Luis Obispo was clean but confining. Word spread quickly. The Indian and his white woman, the false marriage, the lawyer from Texas. Some people stared with sympathy, others with disgust. Clara kept Chayton close, afraid of what might be said to him. Father Francisco visited that evening, bringing hope. I've sent my own telegraphs, he said, to the mission in Fort Worth. asking for their records. Churches keep better accounts than courthouses sometimes. Morrison prowled the town like a wolf, spreading his poison. He'd cleaned up after Miguel's punch, but the bruise on his jaw gave Clara savage satisfaction whenever she saw it. On the second night, as Clara lay sleepless beside Kohana, she heard whistling outside their window. A familiar tune, one the traders had often whistled. Ice flooded her veins. "Don't look," Kohana whispered, but she had to. A figure stood in the street below, face hidden by shadow. But she knew that stance, that cruel, patient stillness. Valdez, the Mexican trader who'd held her, who'd apparently killed his partner after her escape. Morrison wasn't working for any fictional Sullivan family. He was working for the man who needed her dead. "He's here," she breathed. Kohana was already moving, checking weapons, planning. But before he could act, the figure melted away into darkness. "We leave now," Kohana decided. "Wait." Clara caught his arm. "If we run now, we're fugitives forever. But if Valdez is here, he's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes." Morning brought revelations. The sheriff, looking tired but satisfied, called them to his office along with Morrison. "No record of any marriage," he announced. "Fort Worth Courthouse has no Thomas Sullivan. No marriage to Emma Mills. Father Francisco's contacts confirmed it." Morrison's face went pale. "There must be a mistake." "Only mistake was thinking you could forge documents in my jurisdiction," the sheriff said coldly. "You're under arrest for fraud, false representation, and about 6 other charges I'm still working out." But Morrison was already backing toward the door. "You don't understand. I had no choice. He said he'd kill my family if I didn't." A shot rang out. Morrison crumpled, red spreading across his shirt. Through the window, Clara saw Valdez lowering a smoking gun. Their eyes met across the distance, his full of cold fury, hers of defiant triumph. Then Kohana was pushing her down as more shots shattered the windows. The sheriff cursed, returning fire. Shouts rose from the street as townspeople scattered. "Back door!" the sheriff yelled. They ran. Kohana carrying Chayton, Clara close behind. More shots echoed as they burst into the alley. Miguel was there with horses. Blessed, providential Miguel. "Thought you might need these," he said. They rode hard for the Reyes ranch, but Valdez and his men were close behind. Clara could hear the pursuit, feel the past reaching out to drag her back. "The canyon!" Kohana shouted, veering off the main trail. Clara recognized it. A box canyon they'd explored weeks ago, looking for strays. One way in, but Kohana had found another way out, a treacherous path only visible if you knew where to look. They thundered into the canyon, Valdez's men close behind, but instead of being trapped, Kohana led them to the hidden path, a narrow ledge behind a fall of rocks, barely wide enough for horses. "Go," he ordered, slapping Clara's horse's rump. "Get Chayton safe. Not without you. I'm right behind you." Clara wanted to argue, but Chayton needed her. She guided her terrified son up the path, stones rattling down behind them. Below, she could hear shooting, shouts, confusion as Valdez's men realized their prey had vanished. They made it to the top, hearts pounding. Moments later, Kohana appeared, grim but unharmed. "They'll figure it out eventually," he said. "But we have time." They rode for Valle de la Luna, gathering allies. By the time Valdez and his remaining men reached the valley, they found not 3 fugitives, but a town united. Miguel had roused the ranchers. Father Francisco stood with the townspeople. Even the sheriff had arrived with a posse. "That's far enough," the sheriff called as Valdez approached. "You're wanted for murder, among other things." Valdez's eyes found Clara. The hatred there made her shiver. "That woman is a thief and a liar. She stole from me." "Only thing I stole was myself," Clara called back. "And my freedom wasn't yours to own." What happened next would be debated in Valle de la Luna for years. Valdez went for his gun. That much was certain. Whether he meant to shoot Clara or the sheriff, no one could say. But Kohana's knife was faster than any bullet, flying true to bury itself in Valdez's throat. The trader toppled from his horse. his blood soaking into California soil. His men, seeing their leader fall and facing overwhelming odds, surrendered quickly. Self-defense, the sheriff pronounced after a moment. Everyone saw him draw first, and everyone nodded. Because sometimes frontier justice was about more than law. It was about protecting your own. That evening, as the sun set over their valley, Clara stood in her garden, Kohana's arms around her. Chayton played nearby with the Reyes children, his laughter bright and untroubled. Tomorrow, Father Francisco would bring the baby they'd been waiting to foster. Life would go on, richer and fuller than before. No more ghosts, Kohana murmured into her hair. No more running, Clara agreed. They'd been hunted across desert and mountain, through storm and fire, but their love had proved stronger than hate, their chosen family more powerful than blood or law. In this valley, where cultures mixed like streams joining a river, they'd found what they'd been seeking all along. Home. You know, Clara said thoughtfully, I think I'll keep the name Clara. Emma Mills died in that trader's camp. Clara is who I became. Clara Swift. Kohana said, My wife. Your wife. She agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him as the first stars appeared overhead. From the cabin doorway, Chayton watched his parents with satisfaction. His family was complete, his home secure. Tomorrow there would be a new baby to help care for, new adventures to explore. But tonight, there was peace. Thank you for the fire, Clara whispered against Kohana's lips, remembering that first night when he'd shared his warmth with a broken stranger. Thank you for helping me remember I had fire to give, he replied. They stood together as darkness fell over Valle de la Luna, no longer hunter and hunted, but simply a family who'd fought for their right to exist. In the distance, guitars began the evening's music, and voices rose in harmony, Spanish and English and languages older still, blending into something new and beautiful. Clara smiled and led her husband inside. Their son needed dinner. The baby would arrive tomorrow. And there was a life to be lived. A good life, built from ashes and determination and love strong enough to bridge two worlds. In the moon-washed valley they called home. Anything was possible. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Let us know in the comments so we can connect with listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts on Clara and Kohana's journey. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful frontier stories to life.